This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
So Stroh's returned to the practice squad, and I got to tell you, after last week, I feel like I have really high expectations this week.
I think this is gonna be a good show.
Like,
I'm excited for it.
Week.
We did.
What if I?
We really did.
What if I told you after starting?
This sounds like an ESPN 30 for 30. What if I told you?
What if I told you after derailing things to start the show last week? I have another question I want to ask before we get into everything.
Let's do it. You know, these are my favorite.
This one's not big. So I was thinking,
you're just throwing this on me now. Like, I have no idea what you're bringing up here.
Well, so this one is almost for people listening as much as it is for you. I feel like we need a hashtag.
Ooh, okay.
Is it just hashtag the practice squad? Is it just TPS? Like, I don't know. I feel like we need a hashtag. We post this stuff on social media. We interact with people on social media. I feel like we need something to go with the show.
I think TPS would probably be the best way to go. It's short.
It's short. But if you don't know what the hell it is, you'd be like, what the hell is TPS? That's my concern. So we don't need to get too deep into it. It was something I was thinking about today. And obviously you can let us know on Twitter at Brendan Riley _ at Adam R. Strohs. What should our hashtag be? Because I feel like we need a show hashtag. Because we're not going with the show Twitter account. We're not doing a separate account for the show. So that's basically what I want in lieu of that. But coming up today, is there hope on the horizon in Detroit sports? I feel like that's a question we've asked a million times, but I think there's reason to believe it is. And Strohs, I don't even know how to describe our second topic, but basically we both have some fun stories with, I don't know, getting pulled over / getting arrested.
With the police.
Go ahead and take a guess which one of us have been arrested. But first, Strohs, you wanted to talk about the possible trading of Darius Slay, and I'm guessing we might be on different spots with this. I really, really don't think it's going to happen. Do you?
Oh, I think there's a very good chance it's going to happen. And okay. Look, I think it screams to the issues with this organization. I find it funny how Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia have handled this situation. There's rumor and speculation that they might be drafting a quarterback at 3 and possibly trading Matt Stafford, and they run to the high hills to scream that no, Matt Stafford's not being traded. We're not trading our franchise quarterback. We're not trading our baby boy. Yet Darius Slay, who is arguably your best player on defense, and look, I get it, that defense was bad last year, but it wasn't bad because of him. Darius Slay is possibly in the crosshairs of getting traded, and they're out there at the combine like, oh, we're exploring all possibilities. We're exploring possibly trading Darius Slay. It's not an active situation, but we are listening to trade offers. Guys, that makes it an active situation. And look, I get it, right? You don't necessarily like what Darius Slay brings to that locker room. He's a vocal guy, talks a lot. He's one of those guys who will essentially flaunt his paycheck because that's how he is. That's just how he's programmed.
He's very vocal that he wants to be paid like the best cornerback in the league.
And look, I get it too, right? Because he's going to be 29. You don't pay cornerbacks after the age of 30. You just don't do it. They usually lose a step or two. So I understand the financial ramifications here, and I understand where Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia are. All that being said, you don't got to come out and tell everybody about this.
So I think you're taking too much out of what they say. I don't know when this regime has ever been open with us. Like, I don't think this regime has ever told us what's actually going on. Anything that's said by a GM or a coach during the combine or leading up to draft season, it's garbage. It's literally useless. It means nothing to me. I don't believe for a second they're going to trade Matthew Stafford, but it has nothing to do with anything they've said. Like, if they were to trade Matthew Stafford, it would only shock me because of my personal beliefs and nothing that they have said. When it comes to Darius Slay, I think it's actually really interesting. And the reason I don't believe there's any way they trade him is because this regime has at least some level of expectations. We've discussed that. Those expectations might not be good enough, but they still exist. And I actually don't think you should be paying Darius Slay.
And wait, hold on. Just to recap real quick, you subscribe to the opinion that they have to win next year. They have to show some type of improvement and be in playoff contention next year. Otherwise, they're out. I am on the other side where I feel like they could blow up the whole season. They could suck all year long, and they're not going anywhere. They're just
it's
not.
interesting because I don't believe anything this regime says, but ownership doesn't have to come out and say anything. That's the difference. Like GMs and coaches and like they're always talking at the combine and leading up to the draft. That's just what they do. Owners don't have to say anything. And for a long time, owners didn't say anything here. For Martha Ford to come out and publicly say that there's expectations when nobody asked her, that was her decision. I don't know why you wouldn't take it seriously. I mean, again, I don't think that those expectations are high enough. I don't think 8 or 9 wins should keep them. But I don't know where you could possibly believe. Like, what is the benefit to her coming out and saying that if it's not true?
I think it's just to quell the fan base. The fan base, you have to remember.
You quell the fan base by coming out and saying the expectations are low, but they exist?
No.
Because it didn't work.
Because what she came out and said was they have to be in playoff contention next year, which leaves it wide open, leaves the doors wide open, right? Because playoff contention consists of what? Going into December and being what? The 7th, 8th, 9th team to possibly get in? Like, what is playoff contention? It's wide open. It's open to interpretation. So she says that, and it's to get the fan base to calm down because the fans were irate at that time.
They were irate afterwards. I think that you I don't know what you're basing this off of, man. Like, I don't. This
organization has done nothing to instill any level of trust or belief in anything that they have ever done. So I'm just looking at history here.
Yeah, I'm looking at Martha Ford. I have no reason to believe Martha Ford is lying. None.
Look, I don't see her moving on from either one of these guys. Okay? She's one of those people who seems to, and look, I'm basing this all off of her relationship with Jim Caldwell. She fell in love with Jim Caldwell. She thought he was excellent, thought he was the cat's meow.
And they fired him after 9 wins.
Bob Quinn fired him after 9 wins. Martha didn't want him to go.
What do you have a personal relationship with these people?
No, but
the owner who fell in love with him let him go after 9 wins. Jim Caldwell was the most successful Lions coach of our lifetime.
I know.
And they let him go.
Right. To bring in Matt Patricia, to bring in Bob Quinn's boy.
But like you're basing it off of she fell in love with Jim Caldwell, so she can't possibly fire. Like she let him go.
Bob Quinn fired him. If she had heard druthers, I'm almost positive he'd still be here.
Based on what? Based on what?
Based on the fact that she's come out and I love Jim Caldwell. Jim Caldwell's my man.
Because of like a 5-word statement, despite the fact she let him get fired.
On top of the fact that you just said it yourself, the best coach in Lions history. Okay? So like she moved on from him. Like, I get it, all right? Like she moved on from him. Or Bob Quinn made that decision. They wanted to go in a different direction. So now we're going in this direction. So you mean to tell me that you're going to scrap a plan where you had a head coach who was regularly in playoff contention, regularly winning 9 games, to go in a different direction? You're just going to tear it all down, because that's what they're doing here. They're tearing it all down to try to rebuild it, whether it be in the Patriot way, whether it be in the Bob Quinn, Matt Patricia way, whatever way they're building it. You mean to tell me that they're going to blow them out after 3 seasons?
I mean to tell you that I have no reason to believe she's lying to me. I have none. You're in your head here, man.
We'll totally find out next season, because I don't think they're going to be worth a damn next year. I don't care what happens. I don't care what happens with the draft. I don't know what you're bringing here with free agency. I know you got a ton of money to spend, but you're going to sit there and lace a guy like Danny Amendola with almost $6 million for what? The guy has scored no more than 4 touchdowns in a season.
Nothing. I mean, $6 million is nothing. $6 million for a third receiver is fine. But to get away from this part of it, it honestly takes us right into it. My expectations are low in that I don't think this team can win playoff games or do anything under Matt Patricia. But I think having a healthy Matthew Stafford, you're going to be in playoff contention more often than not. And that's what takes us into this topic where we actually wanted to get. I think Darius Slay is the perfect example of why it's an issue to keep this regime for Matt Patricia's 3rd year, because I don't think you should be paying Darius Slay. If you want to franchise him for a year or 2, fine, whatever. But you don't pay 30-year-old cornerbacks. Like, it just doesn't work out. And I mean, he's been very public about the fact that he wants to be the highest paid.
He wants like $16 million a season. That's just crazy.
They drop off a hill after 30 with very rare exceptions.
Yep.
So what you had said to me to even get into the idea of talking about Darius Slay is you think that trading him signals a rebuild. And I don't agree, because I think the offense is very close to being good enough to. I think the offense should keep you in playoff contention. Like, you should. It's not a lot to ask for an average defense.
What's that based off of? What is your take based off of as far as the offense should keep you in playoff contention? Is that because
it's based off of the fact
what
that
happened last year for roughly 8 games?
It's based off of the fact that Matthew Stafford, when healthy, alone, like his whole career, how many years have the Lions not been in playoff contention under Matthew Stafford? 2 or 3. So like I'm using. For the most part, when Matthew Stafford is your quarterback, you're already in playoff contention. And last year's offense, I think, was either a top 2 or 3 offense under Stafford when he was healthy. They haven't had a better offense than that outside of maybe the 2011 team where he threw for 5,000 yards his first year back from the back-to-back injuries after being drafted. Mm-hmm. And then maybe that 2014 team, but he wasn't very good that year, to be fair. But that was the first year of Golden Tate. You had Reggie Bush in the backfield as a somewhat successful running back. So just based off of the history of when Matthew Stafford's at quarterback, they're already a good offense. And I think Darrell Bevell's the best offensive coordinator they've had. So, I mean, I think if healthy, your offense projects to be at least in the top 10 range. At the top 10 offense with a useless defense doesn't do anything.
Let me pose this to you then. All right, so there's a lot of talk because first off, let me ask you this. Who do you feel are the best offensive linemen on this team currently? I think we both agree that Ragnow's probably number 1. I'm going to go Glasgow number 2. Then I'll probably go Taylor Decker, who's hit or miss. Joe Dahl's a guy. And then you got Numbnuts that they brought in from Baltimore, the free agent.
I can't. His name gives me right out.
Yeah. So you've got him, and he's constantly hurt.
I got to tell you, it's hard to think of offensive lineman names in February.
Right. I get it. So my point here is you basically got 2 guys who are solid on your offensive line, right? And 2 guys that I think you more or less believe in. One of those guys is probably not going to be brought back, and that's Graham Glasgow. So now, again, you're retooling this offensive line. We've established on previous podcasts that your running back can't stay healthy, so you have to add to that mix. Your third wide receiver is Danny Amendola, who has never eclipsed 700 yards as a slot wide receiver.
I don't know what you want out of a wide receiver. Like, he was fine. Like, he wasn't anything special, but like
he wasn't. But you're gonna give a guy who's nothing special $6 million. I mean, you could just go create a guy, go get a guy, make a guy. Go get a guy undrafted and bring him in here and let him show out. Go find these guys.
You're going to go get an undrafted free agent,
doesn't happen.
And in year 1, he's going to... In year 1, no, you don't. You're overreacting to what $6 million is.
My overreaction is to how this organization operates. You bring in all the retooled old Patriot guys, like whatever you are, whatever you did back then. Okay, good enough. We're going to bring you here.
$6 million is 3% of the cap.
Okay.
You have 53 players on your roster, and the bottom guys don't get anything.
You can go sign a guy for 2 who's going to probably give you equal production to Danny Amendola. And look, I'm not going to die in the Danny Amendola hill here. And my point is, I'm trying to draw your attention to how this organization is operating. Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't like it either. I don't like it either, but I guess I don't know what you're trying to prove. Like, what I am saying is the offense. Yeah, I don't love the Glasgow thing. Like, obviously that's a legitimate problem, but like they're going to gain things in this offseason too. They're not just going to lose things. I have every expectation the offense will be as good as last year because your quarterback is back. Your number 1 wide receiver is back. Your number 2 wide receiver is probably gone. Most of your offensive line is returning, and the offensive line wasn't great by any means. I mean, I think they got more crap than deserved last year. They kept the quarterback relatively clean. The running game wasn't there. But guess what? Like, I don't believe the running game needs to be there. Like, I would like to have a running game, but the offense is capable of keeping you in playoff contention if your defense is even somewhat respectable. Now, that's the thing. Shows I don't think the defense is going to be somewhat respectable, and that's a regime problem. But back to the Darius Slay thing and my original point, the Darius Slay situation is the perfect example of the problem with this regime. If you believe that this regime has some level of expectation to win, trading Darius Slay is just idiotic. It'll be interesting to see if they go that route. I'll put it this way. I'm more open to the fact that they will trade him than I am to the fact that they could win 2 games and come back. I'm comfortable saying an organization doesn't come out of nowhere to tell you that they're going to fire somebody if things don't reach a certain level of expectation and then not fire them. Because if you think fans were pissed when they made that statement, boy, will they be pissed when the regime comes back and they were lied to. I think there isn't fan apathy with the Lions. I think there was a time when there was apathy, and we've passed that because they've been at least playoff relevant for a decade now. But Darius Slay, if you're a good organization, you say, look, we can't justify paying this guy because we're not Super Bowl contenders right now. If you're a Super Bowl contender and you need to overpay a 29-year-old, fine. If you're a team that missed the playoffs last year, you need to be making long-term business decisions and saying we can have a competent, maybe not as good, but a competent defense without him. But the problem was, even with him, their defense was atrocious. Even with him, their defense was useless. So if you're Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, I don't know how you could possibly move on from Darius Slay. I mean, unless they just don't care about defense, unless they think defense doesn't matter at all. And while I disagree, I mean, you can make that case, but then the problem is stop running the football because you can't run the football if you're going to play that way. And even look at the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, they're a great example of a team who went into the season, their defense was awful, but they figured it out in the middle of the season, and like they needed it still. So I don't see, if they trade Darius Slay, I'm really curious, like, what the hell they think is going to happen to the defense, because it sure as hell was nowhere near where it needed to be last year. And to me, it's unthinkable that an owner would come out and say, we have expectations to quell the fans, and then not follow up on those expectations.
But do you not agree that Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn both reek of arrogance? Matt Patricia has essentially moved on from guys who are very good players in this league just because. Either they talk too much or maybe he doesn't want to adjust his scheme to fit what they do. And then they go out and they overpay for guys like Justin Coleman, who I think was a solid pickup last year, but he's a slot corner, and you gave him a ton of money, and he played pretty average.
And that's why I have some level of openness that Darius could get traded, because they definitely are arrogant. But I would tell you, I think people tend to lose some of that arrogance when their job's on the line. When you think that, and maybe these people aren't that way. I don't think everybody is. I think some people can stay arrogant in the face of being fired, but I just think it gets a lot harder. I think you start to make more traditional calls when you feel like your job's at stake. And coming up again, is there hope on the horizon for Detroit sports teams? If you listen to me and Strohs talk about the Lions, you could probably guess that topic's about a different team.
It's all doom and gloom.
and odd run-ins with the law, I guess, coming up next. But Strohs, you got anything else to wrap on this? I think our biggest issue with each other here isn't even what the topic's about. It's about whether or not this team has expectations. And that's not a place unfortunately, we're probably going to get back to that place. Football season's not still for 6 months. We'll probably get back to that place a couple times before actual football season.
You know what? I think there's a strong possibility that Darius Slay does get moved. And I think
if he does, we'll obviously react to it then too.
Right. I think your defense is worse for it if he does get moved. I just, at this moment in time, today, February 27th, 2020, I have little to zero faith in Bob Quinn making calls with the draft, and I have little to zero faith with Matt Patricia at the helm running this defense. So moving on from really, really talented guys and bringing in just shells or bringing in dudes off the street or drafting rookies and then putting them in spots does not scream success to me. And that's part of the reason why I think this team is going to fail next year, but I think they get that extra year. And again, that delves into another topic that we weren't even going to be touching on.
I don't disagree with you. I think they can fail next year and get another year too, but they can fail by my standards, not by Martha Ford standards. I don't think 8 or 9 wins is acceptable in year 3. To me, that's still failing. Mm-hmm. And I do think that gets them another year. So
I think that's totally acceptable for the Fords.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do too, because that's what they told us. Mm-hmm. I believe what we were told. But coming up next, it's so weird to really sell this topic, because I think a lot of times, Strohs, our middle topic is a little more relatable. And I don't know if our listeners are going to relate here. Strohs and I have some stories with you about run-ins with the law. Strohs, I don't even know where to start, because my stories are so tame. Do we start with your big stories? How about this, Strohs? tell everyone how we got onto this topic. What did you tell me about that got our brain started on this topic?
All right, so a little backstory. You know how I bought that massive TV? Well, that massive TV has really limited me in how I lay out my my living room and my living space at my condo.
Okay.
So I've essentially been furniture shopping for like the last 3 weeks. Like I have no couch. I've got nothing. I've got a bed. That's all I have.
You don't even have a chair?
I don't even have a chair. I've got nothing, man. It's a mess right now.
You spent like $5,600 or something like that already.
Yeah, I have. I mean, it's because I got a washer and a dryer and I got a TV.
Okay.
So, I have like I said, I do have a bed. But otherwise, if like anybody was to come over, we're just pulling up the floor.
You're going to spend $10,000 furnishing this place.
Right. That's what it's going to be. Anyways, I got out of work Saturday and I was racing out to Gardner White to go see this lady that my mom had introduced me to on Friday. Side story, I was there on Friday and my mom decides to verbally assault me in the middle of Gardner White, talking down to me like I'm a small child. Do you ever want to go and fight your mother? I wanted to in the middle of a furniture store. It was fantastic. So I ended up racing out there and trying to get out there because I know they close at 9. And I got out of work at like 7:15. So I was going to be cutting it close and I had some things to do. So I was doing 94 on I-75 and I got pulled over by a police officer who totally could have wrote me.
Not on the east side of the state, because that's not really on the west side of the state. What, 70 miles an hour, right?
Yes, 70 miles an hour. So I was going 20.
There are stretches that are shorter.
Yes.
Or that are slower.
Slower, yeah. And there's also, I think if you go further south to like not in Michigan, I think it goes up to 75, like down in Kentucky or Tennessee or whatever. Anyways, so I was doing 24 miles over the speed limit. And I was floating. I didn't even realize I was going that fast until I seen his lights go on and I was like,
I don't know how. So I've like pushed 90. I don't even know if I've gotten over 90. I've pushed 90 without realizing how fast I was going. Like, but once you start getting to 90, 95, man, like, were there other cars on the road?
There were. And like,
did you not notice that none of them could keep up with you?
I wasn't really paying attention to them. I don't know. I was kind of like in my own little world. So, which makes me probably the most unsafe driver. Also, this is the same guy who watches March Madness games on his cell phone while he drives.
Yeah. No, I remember that.
So, anyways, I played the I just moved here card, and the cop was cool enough to where he only wrote me for 5 over, which was fantastic on him. If he's listening,
was
right
your
now,
driver's license?
It's still
was
Indiana.
Your driver's license?
It's still Indiana.
Okay.
My plate's still Indiana. I meant here's another side story. I meant to get my license changed. Last Friday, but I had to cancel because I had to go look at more furniture. So I rescheduled it, and now I'm not going to update my driver's license until March 6th. So
can they not see the history of where you've lived? I would have just thought that, like, in looking up your driver's license, they could see that.
I mean, I don't think so, because when I was living here, I did have an Indiana driver's license and an Indiana plates. And I had been pulled over by the Troy police, by the same cop twice in roughly 2 weeks, both times for speeding.
Oh my God.
And he was like, "So have you lived here before?" And I was like, "Yeah." And like I had to give him my address that I used to live at. So he like punched that in and he was like, "Okay, cool. So you did live here." So like,
I wonder if it's different with a different driver's license, like a out-of-state driver's license.
So this is what
either way, not important.
This is what I do know. I do know that Michigan and Indiana are reciprocal states. So whatever happens in Michigan happens in Indiana. Whatever happens in Indiana happens in Michigan. So my insurance is going to go through the roof. Anyways, so that kind of spooled out because we were trying to figure out what to talk about for this middle topic, because I was like, anything silly happened to you this week? And this is my silly that happened to me. And then somehow we got into random topics about run-ins with the law.
And if you have weird ones, of course, at Brendan Riley _ at Adam Marstroz. So none of mine are recent. I did get pulled over. I want to say it wasn't last year, but it was the birthday. So it was the day after my birthday 2 years ago, driving home from Grand Rapids to Detroit. I had forgotten to update my tabs. And it was literally the day after my birthday. So cop pulls me over and I was like, I could not figure out why. I definitely wasn't speeding. I was on the highway. I didn't think I'd done anything wrong. He asked for license and registration. I handed my driver's license. And before I can even like look to find my registration, he goes, "Oh, don't worry about it." So that was really nothing. I do have one speeding ticket, which I always enjoy telling this part of the story. So I was 17. I got my license at 17, so I only had it for a few months. I was driving a friend's boyfriend home and was lost. I didn't know where I was. And I was on a road that by my house was 55. Where I was, it was 35. So that's the only speeding ticket I've ever got. But my funniest story
for the whole thing?
No, they wrote me for
good,
5
good,
under.
good.
I think I was 20 over. But my funniest story, I always enjoy this, is I'm that guy. 3 separate times I've had a cop come up to my car for loitering. So my first job ever, I don't know. I definitely don't think I was legally old enough to work. But I was passing out flyers door to door. And I was doing it with 3 friends. Mm-hmm. And we'd take breaks and sit in the car. And if I'm being honest with you, probably longer breaks than we should have. We might take a 45-minute break sitting in the car. It's hot outside during the middle of summer. And sometimes like we'd be prepared, man. Like we'd be like bring like Game Boys. We'd be sitting in the car playing Game Boys, hanging out, listening to music in the middle of a subdivision, mind you.
You're just hanging out, just chilling.
So the first time we're like just sitting in a car for 45 minutes in a subdivision, a cop pulls up behind us and we're like all freaking out. I don't think I didn't have my license at this point, so I hadn't been pulled over. I don't know if anyone else had. And at the end of the day, like they're like, hey guys, like you can't just sit in your car in a subdivision for an hour. Like you need to move. The second time I think we might have actually been in like a Walmart parking lot. Like I think we stopped at like a Walmart to grab like water bottles and Gatorade and stuff like that. And just sat in the Walmart parking lot. Cop pulls up second time. Now it's the same 4 guys, so like we've been through this before. A little more composed, still nervous. I don't think anyone likes to have the cops coming up to their car. Same deal though. Hey guys, like you can't chill in a Walmart parking lot for 40 minutes, especially like you got 4 like young dudes. I think like people. The first time I'm confident someone called the cops because we're in a subdivision. There's no way a cop randomly pulled up on us. I don't know about the second time, and the third time was my favorite. The third time, 2 of the guys in the back were taking a nap. I was sitting in the passenger seat. I see in the rearview mirror, cop pulls up behind us. I literally say to the driver, cop, turn around, tap the 2 guys sleeping on the knee and say, hey guys, cops. They just like barely wake up. And again, same deal. Cops, you got to be on your way. Like we never actually got in trouble for it. But the third time, like we were pros, man. The third time I literally just like this is a story. I'm still friends with all these guys. This is a story like we'll still tell from time to time. Like we are pros at loitering.
And like, how old were you when all this happened? Like 16?
So it was 15? Over the course of a couple of years. I want to say between 14 and 16.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, when you
mine are tame, but still funny.
When you run into the police at that age, it's a little bit nerve-wracking. I like how by the time the third time rolled around, you're like, cool, bro, whatever.
And keep in mind, like I'm working. This is my first job, like so that's scary too. Like I'm getting, the cops are talking to me while I'm at work.
What was this job? I mean, what did
in case you're wondering,
what did you do? You
passing out flyers door to door,
solicited people like here.
Yeah, I didn't even do that. I literally just like walked up to doors and placed flyers.
On doors.
It was nothing. And like I'm just being real. Like at 14 years old in your first job working with friends, like you can imagine when you take breaks, they're a little extended.
Yeah, for sure. So mine are totally different than yours.
I didn't have the greatest work ethic at 14. No, I know. So I didn't know how to get into this because we're in such different ends of the spectrum. I got like a loitering. Like, can you deal with the cops for anything less important than loitering?
I don't think so. But
go ahead. I need to hear your stuff.
So, I've got 2 that I'll tell you. In between the ages of 18 to 23, I was a menace to society. I don't think that shocks anybody, but I was a hot mess for sure.
No.
So at 19, I was cruising Gratiot, driving up and down Gratiot with 2 of my buddies from high school, and we had 2 bottles of vodka in the car, and we were drinking and driving because that was cool. And trying to pick up chicks on Gratiot.
Joe just casually mentions like drinking and driving, watching TV and driving. It's who he is.
It's who I am. It's what I am. Again, still a menace to society, especially when I'm behind a wheel. Anyways, I think we made like an illegal lane change. Basically, we just didn't use our blinker to switch lanes. And apparently the police had been watching us. That there were a couple cars behind us. And we were just trying to pull up close to these girls to talk to these girls. That was all we were trying to do. God. And next thing you know, the lights come on and we pull over into a parking lot and basically the police pull us out of the car. And as they're going through the car, they find the bottles of booze. really, really nerve-wracking. The Roseville police were A1. They essentially made us go dump the vodka out and then just throw the bottles in a dumpster and let us go on our way. Now, the thing about this was me and my buddy Dan and my buddy Troy, we get back in the car. Troy was sitting in the back seat. And when we got back in the car, I slid into the back seat because I was like, I just need a moment to myself because of everything that just happened. And I'm just sitting back there, and Troy's like, "Hey, Adam, can you reach down into the side door and see if my bag is still there?" And I was like, "Your bag?" I was like, "What are you talking about?"
My bag.
He was like, "Just see if he's like, there should be like a little Ziploc bag there." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So I reached down and I grabbed this bag and I pulled out. I was like, "Yeah, I was like, "Bro, what is this?" He was like, "Oh, it's my weed." So he had a Ziploc bag full of weed stuffed in the car door that the police just searched this vehicle. So we had booze and we had weed. This is back before weed was legal, because I'm old. So yeah, that was.
They didn't find the weed.
They didn't find the weed, thank God, because at that point, I think all of us are going to jail. But they let us off with basically a warning. We got to throw the vodka out. So really cool run-in with the police there. That was awesome because they were A1. I was a little bit pissed that we had to dump all of our booze out because that was expensive. But when I was 20, I was hanging out in South Warren, which is not a great neighborhood. It was like 8 Mile and Van Dyke. It's basically, if any of you guys know where that area is, it's like by all the strip clubs. I was just hanging out with my buddy Josh. We were partying at some of his friend's house. Anyways, the cops roll up because there was a noise complaint. My buddy Josh gets arrested for he had a warrant out for his arrest because he didn't pay a parking ticket. So like something dumb. And I'm trying to figure out where they're taking him because he just looked at me. He's like, "Just bail me out." And I said, "Okay, cool. I got you." Mind you, I'm 20 at this point, and I've been drinking pretty heavily. And the cops were all cool. They knew what was going on. They were like, "Just go back in the house. Everything will be okay. We got to take him away." No, I was like, "All right, well." I was like, "I need to know where you're taking him."
We dealt with the important stuff like the parking tickets.
Right. And I was like, I just need to know where you're taking him. And basically this turned into an argument between me and the police who kept telling me to go away. They're trying to do their job. And me being like, "Cool, I just need to know where he's going so I can bail him out." And they're like, "You need to go back to the house."
What are you doing at 19 years old that you're this comfortable listening? Like the cops telling you to shut up and you're like, nope, I got this.
Because have you not learned anything? I'm the most confrontational guy you'll ever meet.
If you weren't drinking, would you have done that?
Probably. Like, I hate authority. I hate being told what to do. So the moment you tell me what to do, I'm basically like, fuck you. I can't help myself. It's just how I'm programmed. It sucks. It gets me in so much trouble. You have no idea. So anyways, cops are telling me to go away.
No,
and
very easy to believe. I'm
not going away. And next thing you know, I'm getting slammed on the hood of a police car and I'm getting arrested. And I'm spending an evening in Warren's awesome jail cell. Mind you, the whole time that I'm in this jail cell, there's a dude who's tweaking on PCP next to me, and he's just screaming bloody murder. And it's insane, dude. He wants to have conversations with me, and then while we're having conversations, he starts yelling about stuff. It was so changed my life. Like I've been pretty good after that. It was nuts, man. Absolutely.
Well, in the life of this podcast,
crazy.
We have heard about Strohs being shot in the leg at a bar. We have heard about Strohs being arrested. We'll find out what else Strohs has done next week. But coming up, is there finally hope on the horizon for Detroit? Of course, always we'd love to hear from you at Brendan R. I gave your at there. At Brendan Riley _ at Adam R. Strohs on Twitter. Strohs.
We should just do one. Just merge them.
Just at Brendan R. Strohs. That one does not exist, at least not yet. I don't know. Maybe it does. Now I'm kind of curious. But is there hope on the horizon in Detroit sports? I was thinking about this yesterday.
I love this topic, by the way.
I want to be clear. The horizon is like it's still out there.
It's like 4 years away, maybe 5.
Yeah, I'm not telling you that we're there by any means, but I can't think of like the last time I was hopeful about the Detroit Pistons, maybe a little bit early on in the Stan Van Gundy years, but it was very short-lived. The Tigers haven't really cared since they got swept in the playoffs. The Red Wings were refusing to rebuild. What I think we finally have in Detroit is a sense of direction that makes sense. Like not just like the Pistons have been trying to win. In my opinion, I've said this before, until this year, the Pistons went into the season with the expectation and the goals of winning every year since like the early 2000s. I think by selling at the deadline, by moving off Andre Drummond, by waiving Markieff Morris, they wish they could have moved Derrick Rose, but who knows? Maybe they can move him next year. We're seeing the Pistons move in a direction that's very clear-cut rebuild. In fact, they have the 6th worst record in the NBA right now. We just talked last week or 2 weeks ago. They hadn't had a top 5 pick since Darko in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the 6th worst record in the league right now. So like they're finally moving towards rebuild. The Red Wings selling off at the deadline as well. Yzerman at the helm. Obviously, people are optimistic about that. He's been successful in building a team. And the Tigers, well, it's not so much that they've chosen a direction, but it's that they're finally getting to a place where like they're almost out from all their bad contracts. Obviously, Miguel Cabrera is a terrible contract, and he's still got 4 years left. But Prince Fielder's contract, they're finally done paying him after this year. Jordan Zimmerman's finally done being paid after this year. And we've seen some promise, of course. The farm system, while not elite, has some pieces in it. At the very least, we're probably getting close to the time when there's guys to be excited about watching play for the Tigers. I think we can finally say that all 3 teams are at least headed in the right direction. And I want to be clear, just based off the way sports work, chances are at least one of these 3 teams, if not more than one, is going to fail a rebuild. But now we have 3 teams in a rebuild. And I think that sometime in the near future, maybe it's 5 years away still, we will have a successful team in Detroit. One of these 3 teams is going to figure their stuff out and give us something to enjoy, Strohs.
I mean, I hope you're right. I really do. But, I think you're probably more spot on than you maybe even realize, because let's just look at the Tigers, right? You've got guys in baseball's top 100. I think you've got like 3 or 4 prospects that have made Baseball Perspectives top 101 or whatever it is. And
I looked yesterday. I don't know who did the list. The Tigers had 4 of the top 50.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, that talks about how you've got guys who are coming up in your system. Now, look, prospects don't always pan out, but I think that's a good sign. And like you mentioned, you have a lot of contracts coming off of the books, which opens up a lot of free agent money. I think the team that might have it the most together is probably the Red Wings. And that being said, I like what the Pistons are doing. I like where the Pistons are headed. I like them trading at the deadline. I like them selling off pieces. I think you've got guys on this roster next year that if things don't go well again, you can trade and get some value. A guy like Derrick Rose, as long as he stays healthy and performs. But the Detroit Red Wings, I think, at this past trade deadline, I think they did a fantastic job. I think Steve Yzerman has everybody's confidence up here.
More than anything, you have a guy at the helm who's proven he can do this. Mm-hmm. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
You don't have that in Detroit with the Tigers. You don't have that with the Pistons.
You definitely don't have it with the Lions.
With those 2 teams. I'm honestly leaving them entirely out of this conversation because because we fought earlier, like I have no faith in Bob Quinn. Well, I don't hate Bob Quinn. I'm a soft fan of Bob Quinn. I don't love him. I definitely think he's done some things right, but I hate Matt Patricia, and he's still the head coach. But when I talk about the hope, it's just like these teams, specifically the Red Wings and Pistons, because at least the Tigers, like while they were refusing to focus on the future, they were in the midst of winning, so it made sense. The Red Wings and the Pistons were like fighting just to be playoff, like just to try and get into the playoffs. So like these are teams that put off a rebuild for so long. I mean, seriously, the Pistons are in their first rebuild since before I watched basketball.
Yeah.
Like at least these teams acknowledge what they need to do. They're living in reality now is basically what I'm telling you.
No, and I think you're spot on. If you're a Detroit sports fan, I think where you're at right now, it's nothing but hope, right? Like you have hope. I have no idea what the Lions are doing. I think the Lions know what they're doing. I don't know if they're rebuilding, if they're trying to go for it. I don't think any of us know what the Lions are doing, but the other 3 teams seem as though they have it all together. I am getting more and more confident with that Pistons front office every time they make a move. It seems to work out, or it seems to be a move based in logic. Al Avila, I need to see a little bit more from.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's they're the most concerning because we don't have a whole lot of reason to believe in Al Avila. Yeah. And to be honest with you, we don't have a whole lot of reason to necessarily believe they're going to spend money that comes off the books. But the thing with the Tigers was, like, for years they were borrowing from the future to pay for the present.
Yep.
And we're getting close to a point where we're paying off those debts. You know, Miguel Cabrera is going to be an issue, but like in most sports, I think you can handle. Basketball's tough because you have to pay, you have to have superstars, but you can usually handle a bad contract or two.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you're paying Miguel Cabrera and you're paying Justin Verlander and you're paying Jordan Zimmerman and you're still paying Prince Fielder, who's been retired now for a couple of years. Like, you can't overcome that. I think the Tigers are still far and away the team I have the least faith in, just because, they've got 4 top 50 prospects.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Like, you have to have 9 starters and 5 starting pitchers plus a bullpen.
Right.
Like, there's still a long way to go.
And again, there's no guarantee that any of these prospects actually work out. I mean, how many times have you seen a 5-tool guy? He's guaranteed a 5-tool guy, and then he makes it to the big leagues, and it just doesn't happen. Just doesn't work out for him.
For the Tigers, it's always
all the time, right? But I think I feel the most confident in Steve Yzerman and what he's been able to do, and he has done a couple things this season. He basically traded for what is it? Was it Brandon? No, Fabry. He traded for Fabry. Basically gave away a bag of balls and a couple hockey pucks and some used jock straps. And you got a guy.
We got for Andre Drummond.
Right. And what you got back in return was a guy who can give you points and produce offensively. Defensively, he's not great, but he produces offensively, which is fantastic for this team. And he's a young player. Also, what he did at this past trade deadline, you gave up Mike Green, who you weren't going to bring back. All right, trade him to Edmonton. You get a conditional pick, and you get a guy who's on long-term injured reserve, and that's just to kind of offset salaries. And you're going to get most of that money back in an insurance deal. So you didn't really lose anything there, and you got a conditional pick. Great. So now you just kind of cleaned up the books a little bit. You trade Andreas Athanasiou, and you get 2 second-round picks. If you were to tell me earlier in the week that, hey, if you were to trade AA and I was to give you a second-round pick, would you take that? I would tell you, yeah, all day long. So now you're going to trade him. You're going to get 2 second-round picks, and you're going to get Sam Gagner, whose contract's going to come off the book after this year. It's like a win all the way around. Like those are 2 awesome moves that he made. And I think he stepped into a situation where he kind of looked at this roster and was like, man, Ken Holland really screwed this up. He, again, like you said earlier with the Tigers, right? Taking from the future to pay off the present, Ken Holland for years would trade away all of your prospects and all of your guys to get aging veterans who would basically give you a year or two, and now it's kind of at this point where you got to rebuild everything. You got to redo your farm system. You got to retool and rework everything. And I think, like you said, the hope's on the horizon. I think the Wings are at least 4 years away. Tigers, probably for
How
real.
How funny is that? I'm sitting here, and this is entirely genuine. Like, I mean this. I think that there is hope on the horizon for these teams. And I'm sitting here the same way as you, is saying, yeah, like you're saying the Wings are 4 years away. I think the Tigers are probably, a ways away. But the thing is,
I think the Pistons might be the closest. And that's the contending for a playoff spot.
Well, and so no, that's the thing. I don't think the Wings are 4 years away from contending for a playoff spot. I don't even think the Tigers, if managed correctly, are 4 years away. Well, it's a little harder to make the playoffs in baseball. But like, I guess what I mean more than anything, it's not even that I'm telling you one of these teams is going to figure out and win a championship, because that's a whole different story. We haven't even gotten to watch the bare minimum like level of fun sports outside of the Lions, who at least they've competed for playoff spots in football. And I'll say this, in football and baseball, making the playoffs is exciting. In basketball and hockey, it's not. At least we've gotten that out of the Lions, which is crazy to say, but the Tigers haven't competed for a playoff spot. The Red Wings and Pistons haven't competed for doing anything in the playoffs. When is the last time that you felt like, again, aside from the Lions, that you enjoyed a season of a Detroit sports team? I think it's maybe the last year the Tigers made the playoffs, which was what, 2016?
Yeah.
And they got swept in the playoffs. So, we're talking bare minimum levels of entertainment. I think we're going to get back to a place where in the next 2 to 3 years, at least one, if not 2 of these teams is fun during the regular season, that you can watch and root for them to win, and they'll do it enough. And whether or not, the Tigers can get into the playoffs, they'll at least be in a race with young pieces. Or the Red Wings, maybe they can get in, but they can't get out of the first round. Like, it's okay. The Grizzlies are a team of basketball that I would think of where they're not going to do anything of relevance this year, but that doesn't mean they're not fun to watch. You've got some young pieces, especially like in a Ja Morant, where you can see where the future's heading, and like competing for a playoff spot is okay when you have those pieces. Competing for a playoff spot when it's on the backs of an aging Blake Griffin, and not aging, but an Andre Drummond who's very ceilings capped, like that's not fun. If you're watching yourselves compete for the playoffs in the back of a 20-year-old, that's a little bit more entertaining.
No, you're absolutely right. It's different too, right? Watching, basically, it's the process. Going through the process to get there, I think, is exciting. It's fun. What happens is, if you remember the Detroit Red Wings before they won their first Stanley Cup in, what was it, 97? It was fun.
So I cannot remember.
It was fun watching them get there. It was watching them build to get there, but it was devastating watching them have a season where they had 62 wins and then they lose to the New Jersey Devils, and then follow that up with a shortened season where they're not really all that competitive. I mean, they make it to the playoffs, but they lose to the Abs. So there comes a point where it gets frustrating as that fan watching all the potential, and then you're like, you at some point you got to win. You got to win. But for probably that stretch of 4 or 5 years, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think there is some renewed hope. And I think there is a little bit of revitalization to Detroit sports. It's probably not going to come this year, maybe not even next year, but the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that, I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be decent.
We'll be able to enjoy Detroit sports.
No, I'm just saying, because it's a process. It really is a process. I know everybody wants it like it was yesterday, but it takes time.
It's tough when you have 4 teams and they're all in that same phase at the same time. That's what's tough. But go ahead and set the countdown on your phone. Within the next 2 to 3 years, you'll be able to enjoy Detroit sports again. I can't promise you're going to win anything, but at least you can have some fun.
You can have some fun.
All right, that's all I got. Of course, you can always continue the conversation with us on Twitter at Brendan Riley _ at Adam R. Stroh. Stroh, you got anything before we get out of here?
No, man, this was a fun one. This was a good one. This is I think we're hitting
getting
that
in the
stride
rhythm
again.
Here.
Yeah, where we argue more and we're angry at each other all the time.
One last reminder for those of you listening who can interact with us on Twitter. I want your thoughts. What's the hashtag? The 2 that come to mind are hashtag the practice squad and hashtag TPS. If you got anything wild and creative out there, willing to listen as well. Otherwise, that's going to do it. This is the practice squad.